This week on Engage the Sage.
Hi everyone, I'm Don Saucier. Welcome to this week's episode of Engage the Sage. This week I'm going to share some recommendations with you about how you can rock your interviews. I'm going to be offering you recommendations that I think are generally going to help you interview for lots of kinds of opportunities. These opportunities might be interviews for research positions, for teaching assistantship positions. It might be interviews for graduate school, interviews for law school, interviews for medical school. Maybe it's an interview for an academic position. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk about recommendations to help you navigate that process to make your interviewing skills more successful. What I'm hoping is that if you follow these recommendations, you're going to be more likely to get offers for those opportunities. My first recommendation is going to be to understand the purpose of the interview. Interviews have two purposes. The first purpose is to give you the opportunity to get the opportunity, to give you the opportunity to promote yourself in a way that allows you to be offered that job, that spot in that graduate program, or that award. The second purpose of the interview, and the one that sometimes people forget about, is for you to collect information that's going to allow you to decide whether or not you want to take that opportunity if it's offered to you. Several of my recommendations are being geared to helping you accomplish these two opportunities, to getting the offer and deciding whether or not you want the offer. My next recommendation is to do your homework on the opportunity. This means you should know what you're applying for. You should know the parameters of the position. You should know about the organization. You should find out about the people you might be working with. A lot of this information is going to be publicly available on the organization's website. So check that out and be aware of what they're putting out there for you to know. When you are interviewing, if you're asking questions that are readily answerable by the information they already put out there, you're not going to look very prepared. So do your homework. Also, in doing your homework, you should review your application materials. You should know what you've told them about you. You should be ready to provide more information about the achievements, the experiences, the accomplishments that are in your application materials because they're probably going to ask about them. My next recommendation is to be ready emotionally to answer questions. Interviews have questions, and that's what makes them scary because you can't always predict and control the questions that people are going to ask you. Now, some of my recommendations later are going to help with that prediction and that control of those questions, but this can be a scary part. We've previously put out a video about how to get ready to answer questions, and I definitely recommend you check that out. But for now, what I'm going to highlight is that when you're asked a question, you engage in the 4-step process that we recommend. That means the first thing when you're asked a question is you smile. Second, you breathe. Third, you think. And fourth, you talk. If you do this, you're going to be more relaxed and give better answers to those questions. Also, in managing your emotions and managing that excite nerve that you might be feeling on that interview, check out our video on excite nerve, I want you to be optimistic. Because if you have the interview, it means that they've reviewed your materials and they are still interested in you. So you should feel pretty good about the situation in front of you. So go in and be ready and be excited about talking about yourself, your abilities, and the opportunity at hand. My next recommendation for rocking interviews is to anticipate the questions you expect them to ask you. Now you might be thinking, I have no idea what they're going to ask me. And to some level, that's true. To some level, you can't predict and control all of the questions. But in my experience, there are two overarching questions that actually create many of the specific questions that people get asked on interviews. The first of those questions is, why are you applying for this specific opportunity? The second is, why should we give you this opportunity? Now, these two overarching questions may lead to a lot of different specific questions about what you know about that position, what the responsibilities of that position are, what your accomplishments are, what your goals are, and how you would fit that position or that opportunity. That's fine. But understanding that really what the interview about is them figuring out why us and why you is going to help you predict and control that experience better. So as you get ready to answer these questions, think about why you're applying to that position. Think about why that opportunity is interesting to you and how that fits your goals. Think about how your achievements and your experiences and your accomplishments make you a good fit to that opportunity. And be ready to talk about those optimistically. You may also want to think about how they might phrase and ask you questions about something in your application materials that might be a concern. Maybe you don't have a lot of relevant work experience. Maybe you have a standardized test score or something that's a little bit on the low side. Think about how they might phrase those questions and how you might answer. My next tip for rocking your interviews is to organize your talking points. When you go into an interview, I think there's some things that you need to say. You need to get those accomplishments out there. You need to get your career goals out there. You need to make a case for yourself as a good match for this opportunity. So know your accomplishments. Know what makes you competitive. Know what's going to make a compelling case for you as the candidate for their position. Be ready to introduce those talking points when it's appropriate during the interview. I'm not saying you should go on a tangent. I'm not saying you should take over the interview. And I'm not saying you should go into a long, detailed soliloquy about why you're awesome. But I'm saying if you have those talking points ready, you're going to find ways to organically work them into your conversation. And you will proactively take ownership of those achievements and make yourself a great match for that position. I would also recommend, and this is consistent with our recommendations on writing, that you keep those talking points to our 4 C's. Make them clear, complete, concise, and compelling. My next recommendation is for you to have your questions ready for the people who are interviewing you. When you have questions ready for the people interviewing you, it shows that you are a serious applicant who is taking the interview seriously. It shows that you are invested in this opportunity. If you don't have questions, it might indicate you're not taking this very seriously, or you haven't done your homework about this opportunity. Now, to reiterate my earlier point, don't ask questions that you readily have the answers available to you. That'll suggest again that you haven't done your homework. But if in doing your homework you found information that was confusing, maybe incomplete, maybe a little contradictory, it is definitely okay to ask about that. What you want to do is use your questions to collect information for yourself to decide whether or not you would accept this opportunity if it was offered to you. So think about what information you would need and then ask about that. I also recommend when you're asking your questions to triangulate your answers to those questions. And what that means is if you have the opportunity to talk to more than one person on your interview, ask them some of the same questions. It may be that their perspectives and their experiences are a little bit different. That might be important in finding out what the real answer to that question might be. So I'm going to share with you now some of my favorite questions to ask when you're being interviewed. What are you looking for in an applicant? What tips would you give me for being successful in this position? Is there anything else you'd like to ask me about? What else should I be asking? And one of my favorites for the end is, how am I doing on this interview? My next recommendation for rocking your interviews is to bring peace to the interview. I think that all of the elements of peace are necessary for an excellent performance on an interview. So be ready to bring that preparation, that expertise, that authenticity, that caring, and that engagement. In particular, regarding authenticity, let your personality come out a little bit. Allow yourself to have some fun on this process. On an interview, the conversation is you. You should enjoy that conversation. This should be one of your favorite topics. So allow yourself to show a little bit of you in being human and authentic in the interview process. And like I said, have some fun in doing it. My final recommendation for how to rock your interviews is to practice your performance. So we've talked about anticipating questions that you would be asked, questions you would ask to other people. We've talked about the talking points that you're going to develop. Practice, ideally with a friend, maybe they can ask you some of those questions, but practice asking and answering questions. If you can't find a friend, do it in the mirror, but find ways to actually go through this process of hearing the questions and responding with ways that you like your answers. This is going to help you in the actual performance. It's also going to help you to manage some of that anxiety, some of that excite nerve you have before you interview. And when you're practicing, particularly if you're practicing with someone else, ask the person who's practicing with you for feedback on your performance so you can rock this thing. So there you have my recommendations for how to rock your interviews. The interview process can be stressful, it can create some of that excite nerve, but as you think about these strategies, as you start to anticipate what those interviews are like and how to manage your performance, you can make them a little bit more predictable, a little bit more controllable, a little less anxiety-provoking, and more likely that you're going to get those opportunities you're interviewing for. In the comments below, I would love to hear your tips for how to succeed in interviews, and I'd also love to hear any questions that you have for how to rock your interviews. Thank you for watching this episode of Engage the Sage. Please like, subscribe, sign up for notifications, share us on social media, and we will see you next time on Engage the Sage.